Welcome back to another episode of Cyber from the Frontlines. And today we are going to dive into a very important topic that may well have a huge impact on future of cybersecurity in general. Uh, AI is revolutionizing many industries, and cybersecurity is no exception. So we definitely wanted to talk about AI, but more specifically generative AI. And joining us today is Christian Rencken, Principal Strategic Advisor at Flashpoint, to talk about the impact of Gen AI on cyber intelligence. Welcome to the show, Christian. How are you doing?
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So I always start with talking about how you started in cyber. What was your journey like, and how did you come to the place where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So it was a bit serendipitous and lucky, as I think it was for so many of us. In,
Right.
in in college, I went to the University of Colorado, and I was really interested in international affairs, and I wanted to be a diplomat. So I studied quite hard to be in the foreign service. But when
Mm,
I graduated, I think there was like a 3% acceptance rate. I remember hearing at the time my graduation had a lot to do with just how many people they were hiring at that point. And a good friend of mine named Tyler Broadbeck, who's also in the industry, he had a role as a BDR at a company called Digital Shadows, which is another cyber intelligence company that was acquired by ReliaQuest recently. And he said, "Hey, if you're hoping to get a job in the meantime while you're studying for this test, why don't you try this out?" And so I did. I frankly kind of just needed the money at that point. It wasn't so much that I was really into it. So I actually started off kind of as a cold calling from the West Coast to the East Coast, waking up at 4:40 a.m. And I realized really quickly, I actually really liked the industry. And so being on the West Coast, working East Coast hours allowed me to stay, I ended my job at 2:30 those days. And so I ended up just kind of staying an extra 3 hours to study to be an Intel analyst. And so I did what I could to pivot from being a BDR to being an Intel analyst at Digital Shadows. And a role opened up quite a while later, and I took that role. And since then, I've been an intelligence analyst at Digital Shadows for about 3 years. Did dark web analysis, campaign tracking, RFI writing, all that. And then I moved to CrowdStrike, where I was eventually became the
mhm.
team lead of the strategic threat advisor team, where basically we would brief companies and governments about kind of the threats targeting their organization, how to mitigate those threats. So it was mostly, Iran, North Korea, China, e-crime, you the Russia, of course, the big ones. And then I was also the global technical lead for Falcon Intelligence Recon and helped launch that product there at CrowdStrike. And I've been
That's
here at
awesome.
Flashpoint for a year, and I'm the principal strategic advisor.
That's really awesome. And you mentioned University of Colorado, right?
Yep.
I also studied at University of Colorado, so in Boulder. So
Nice.
yeah. So
Uh,
yeah, it's interesting. I was there more in the School of Engineering, studying telecom and network security, and but yeah, eventually ended up
yeah,
in cyber as well.
yeah, it's the University of Dion Sanders now.
Uh, that's awesome. That's good to know. Uh, Colorado is really beautiful. I really love that. My time there, especially in Boulder. So beautiful place. Very nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going back in 6 weeks from now, and
Oh,
I can't
nice.
wait.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I probably plan to go next year because I think there's a big get together of our class of when I graduated. So next time I'm thinking of going there for sure. So we'll see how
nice.
it goes. Yeah. Cool. So getting back to the topic on Gen AI, um, can you start giving us an overview of how AI is currently being utilized in the field of cyber intelligence? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're in a really, really exciting place when it comes to the intersection of certain technologies, right? So, of course, AI has been, the buzzword for quite a while. I think
Mhm.
GPT 3 came out in November 2022, and things haven't been the same since. And really, it's been I think a lot of the question from all different industries has been, okay, how do we utilize this technology, and how do we build off of that? I think there's a lot of different areas of cybersecurity, right? But I think that cyber intelligence is one of those spaces that is in particular going to benefit from the use of these large language models. I think right now we are in a place where we are still figuring out where to apply these large language models that I'm sure we'll talk about more. It is quite expensive to do. So there's a kind of a physical limitation that organizations have when it comes to deploying these. But right now, if you think about kind of broadly, you take a step back and think about intelligence, not just cyber, right? It's gathering information, assessing that information, and then taking action on that information. If you think about, gathering, assessing, taking action, there's a lot of different processes within those three buckets. And also, the more information you have, the longer it takes to assess it, the longer it takes to assess it, the longer it takes to take action. And so I think that assessing bit in particular is really where these large language models are going to have a big impact with intelligence, because one big aspect that I'm sure we'll talk about is, I think that a huge portion of security in general that not enough practitioners talk about when it comes to solving problems is, everyone thinks about how to solve a specific problem, whether it's EDR, whether it's network, whether it's cyber intelligence, whether it's phishing or whatever. But we're such an understaffed world that I think the key element is actually time that a lot of us are trying to solve. And so I do think that the use of these LLMs on top of the data sources that all these intelligence companies have been gathering, very much Flashpoint included, is going to help increase the time to action, and really exponentially improve the capabilities of these intelligence companies.
Oh yeah, and when I look at some of the tools that we are already using, there's already a component of AI, and it's a lot of information. I think it's at that nascent stage, but as it gets developed more and more, going to the next level, it's just going to have a huge impact, like you said, in terms of analysis, or in terms of correlating that all that data, the large amount of information we have. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see in what direction certain companies go. At
Yeah.
Flashpoint, I'm really confident I really like the let's call it the AI strategy that we have moving forward. Whether it's the stuff we've launched already or the stuff we're building. But who knows if we're right? But it's going to be very interesting to see different strategies from different companies that can offer cyber.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you touched upon this a bit, but I also wanted to talk about some of the most significant advancements AI has brought to cyber intel in recent years. If you can talk about that as well.
Yeah. So sure. So let's think about cyber intelligence now. Then just let's move from 30,000 feet to get more granular. So right, the intelligence life cycle, right? It's strategic planning and direction, data collection, analysis, dissemination, and feedback. That's kind of you ask a lot of people in the industry, how does intelligence work? What makes a good intelligence product, intelligence analyst, et cetera. I think that the data collection and gathering, which might surprise some people, but also the analysis and reporting, those two parts of the chain are where the most significant advancements that I've seen since let's call it the implementation of large language models within these cyber intelligence companies. So if we take data collection, for example, Flashpoint, we've developed it's kind of like a smart collector. We call it automated source discovery. And basically, we've added AI to the way that we actually source new methods and find new findings. And we're pretty transparent about the amount of information that we're bringing into our platform. And so I can say this, like, I don't know, maybe 6 or so months ago, just as an example, we were bringing about 10 million dark web hits every 3 days. And now we're at about like 27 million. And that's because we've been able to implement this kind of smart AI on top of our collection sources. So that's one way of the data collection. There's a lot of other examples I can go through if you want. And then the other one would be analysis and reporting,
Hmm.
which I think could be far more utilized than anywhere else on those 5 steps that I mentioned. So if we take analysis as an example, right? There's, as given your role, there's so many data sources, there's so many bits of information to look through every day that it is overwhelming. And if
Oh
we're
yeah.
honest with each other, like there's been a break in the industry a little bit where I think honestly, some of us in the industry who talk about the right ways to do intel, we
Mhm.
do miss some of the realities that I mentioned beforehand about time. It's like we only have 8 hours in the day, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't expect me to read a 20-page report and
Right.
do X, Y, and so it's gonna the summarization of so many different disparate sources and bringing them together to analyze and act is that's what I'm most excited for and where I see most of the progress being made uh, so so far.
That's really good to know because, like you said, time is of essence, and how many reports can we look through or collect data from in an 8-hour time window, right? So that's really important. I was kind of curious to understand when you talk about the use of AI in analysis, are you seeing any, are you seeing it's AI, there's a difference in terms of how AI does analysis as opposed to a human, or are you seeing any false uh, positives in that sense from an AI generated analysis?
Yeah, definitely. And I think luckily, I don't know if luckily is the right word, but realistically, where we are as, let's say, consumers of AI, all of us, right? Not just us in security, but all of us who use AI, which is pretty much all of us at this point. We have this kind of leniency that we grant towards hallucinations right now
Mhm.
because we know what's happening and we don't necessarily take things as gospel from what we're seeing. But I say that because some of our the generations we have from something like Ignite AI, something that we have Flashpoint's flagship products called Ignite. We have something called Ignite AI. And basically what we did is I think we have about 14,000 human written intelligence reports. We just trained an AI based off all those intelligence reports. So you can ask questions like, last year a lot of people were saying, tell me about like who is Klopp, right?
Yeah.
It's been actually a year to the day since the move it,
Mhm.
since what happened with it. So it's we had a lot of people asking that. It wouldn't give a perfect example, or it wouldn't give a perfect answer. But what we do is we kind of we append the answer that Ignite AI gives with links with human written reports. So
Mhm.
we know it's going to hallucinate. We know that the answer is not perfect just yet. I'm confident that it will be. But we kind of put that backstop on it by showing, okay, but here's human written analyst reports that we recommend.
Nice. That's good. Next, I wanted to touch about how does AI enhance detection and response compared to traditional methods, and in what way is GenAI helping in predicting and preventing cyber attacks from happening today?
Yeah, so this might be a bit of a niche answer for sort of intelligence practitioners. So I'll do my best to explain. But if you think about like previous ways that intelligence analysts have gone about looking for threats, right? It's primarily been from a signals intelligence perspective. It's primarily been via keywords, right? So this simple example I could give would be, my name's Christian Rencken. If I look for Christian Rencken and bomb, you can have I'm going to bomb Christian Rencken or Christian Rencken is the bomb, right? And it takes human eyes to be able to get that information, get those two hits, right? Those two examples, and say one is a threat and the other is not. Where I really see the these large language models helping a lot when it comes to detection and response for based on those traditional methods is it does actually understand we're getting to the point where it can understand the context text there, and it can decipher between I'm going to bomb Christian Rencken and Christian Rencken is the bomb, right? We can have a machine actually do that for us, so it doesn't actually need human eyes. The other example that I can give is, so we're building out a cyber risk model that basically kind of like models certain findings we have on some of these criminal forms across our different sources. So for example, right, we get a lot of insider threat hits, right? So somebody saying like, hey, I have insider access to X, Y, and Z organization. Does anyone want to pay me for, the privileged or the privileges that I have, and to be able to, do whatever they want to the organization to extort them. We can build out models that can actually identify that and quickly bring that kind of information to companies. So those companies wouldn't need to have those, seem to be antiquated rules looking for the name of their company, insider threat, off all the different hits, right? They can actually we can actually create these large language models to decipher that kind of information itself, and then give the analyst that information. So again, really cutting down the time to understand and take action.
That's nice, which is really, really important as well, considering the threats you're dealing with. Um, so moving on to another topic here, from a challenges and limitations perspective, what are some of the challenges that you see when you want to integrate Gen AI within your operating model, and how do you address those concerns from a reliability perspective, as we talked about earlier as well?
Yeah, so I think the simplest answer to the challenges is just the cost. It's expensive to pipe in a lot of data into an LLM and have it sift through that, summarize it, give that information, get the spit out the summary. It does cost a lot of money. So from a security for cyber intelligence kind of product perspective, the question needs to be, okay, where do we most accurately place these large language models within our platform to where it's cost effective, right? As I just mentioned, Flashpoint's taking in at this point nearly 30 million hits from just our dark web collections, right? And that's just one out of kind of 6 major collection buckets that we have. 30 million hits every 3 days. It's a lot. That would be a very expensive thing to be able to synthesize that, every single bit of that, and
Right.
put out an answer. So the first bit is cost. That's the biggest challenge and limitation there. And then the other one would be I'd say the LLM's kind of decision of which data sources to give an answer, which would to synthesize to then spit out an answer. So as an example, right, we at Flashpoint, we're taking in all ransomware site data. So every time Lockbit makes a post, every time Black Bassa makes a post about an organization, like, we're taking that in, right? We just started feeding the ransomware data to our Ignite AI. And so if you ask it the question now, who's the most recent victim of Lockbit, it kind of has a hard time deciphering from a human written intelligence report that we write about Lockbit compared to like the raw data that we're taking in of the most recent hit from Lockbit, where obviously the best answer is the most recent hit from the Lockbit ransomware site, but it has a hard time deciphering that. Again, it's okay because I'm not like worried about that, because it's gonna that will be something that will be solved, I think, pretty quickly in terms of the innovation horizon that we're all used to and timelines that we're all used to. But right now, I'd say that those two things are kind of the challenges that I foresee.
So we talked about how we are using Gen AI from a cyber security, cyber intel perspective. How is it being used by cyber criminals to enhance their attacks? If you can walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be honest, I'm less worried about this now than I was a year ago. which to maybe give a hint of optimism to this, or more optimism to this answer. I think that there's been a lot of kind of doom and gloom, and which I was a part of that, for this question. But yeah, I think most of the kind of idea of generating the perfect malware, that's a little bit science fiction right now. We're not seeing great malware generation from any of these malicious large language models. And I should probably back up, talk about what malicious large language models are. So I think the first one was May of last year. We saw on specific certain criminal forums, cyber criminals advertising. You can imagine like jailbroken, like ChatGPT or Pi or any of these like personal AI assistants, where they allow for malicious creation, where there are guardrails, right, with ChatGPT. So you can't say to ChatGPT, write me a phishing email to the CEO of X, Y, and Z, where you could do something like that on some of these malicious large language models. Some of them include like Fraud GPT, Dark Gemini, Evil GPT, Triple X GPT. There's a few of them out there. Their malware generation doesn't seem to be that great. Where they are very good is, I call it kind of getting in the door of AI, right? So phishing and spear phishing, those two aspects, they're phenomenal at. So to give you an example, right? I just used the example of write me a phishing email to the CFO of XYZ organization. You can't do that in ChatGPT, but you could say something like, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of this CFO at XYZ organization. Can you write me something compelling to get him to click on my link, right? Or her to click on my link? Like you can change to be able to, phishing and spear phishing output of it is going to be and is pretty going to be pretty bad because of the nature of it being like text generated with phishing and spear phishing. It's hard to really track the amount of times that it is happening. So to give you an example, I know I'm good friends with someone on an incident response team, and he was telling me recently, like, it started from a phishing email that was generated by an LLM. And I said, okay, how do you know that? Like, how can you? And he actually didn't. He was like, oh, actually, I'm not sure. I didn't. Like it's very tough to tell. Is it human written? Is it machine written? And then just to add on to one point about that, there are two variables here that I think just that we can count on to be true, right? It's hard to predict the future of AI by definition of it being artificial intelligence, but I think that the two variables are true. One is that it will decrease the technical barrier of entry for cybercrime and fraud, and then it would also decrease the financial barrier of entry. And when you decrease both of those barriers of entries, you get more individuals in that space. So that's the kind of macro that I'm worried about. To give you just a simple example of that, to back it up with history, right? You look at the ransomware as a service models. As ransomware as a service became more democratized, as the pricing models became more palatable for the consumers of these ransomware as a service models, so too did more people, more cyber threat actors get into ransomware. So then the ransomware was deployed, right? It wasn't necessarily that ransomware got more sophisticated. It was the business model around it. So I think I think in the short term, at least, it's not necessarily going to increase the sophistication of cyber attacks, but it'll increase the amount of them.
Yeah, makes sense. The volume would go up based on the lower barrier of entry for anybody. Much.
Let's call it like the winner in this space, or the grand prize of implementing these large language models into cyber intelligence is if you can map that onto the tech stack that an organization has. So if you can look at threats externally and say, what happened, yesterday that my organization would care about, right? And just to give an easy example, right, it's to map it on, let's call it, vulnerability intelligence to your tech stack, right? What was disclosed? What vulnerabilities were disclosed in the last 3 days that I should care about? prompting that question, and then it knows your tech stack and say, oh yeah, based on this, CVSS score, ransomware risk scores, all these different scores, this is how I would prioritize your day doing X, Y, and Z, something along those lines. And then you can get a little bit more intricate with like fraud teams and insider threat teams, and the SOC, and with IOCs and all that kind of stuff. If you can map that on well to the organization, I think it's really kind of the gold mine that is what we want to hit.
Cool. So just moving along to a different topic here. How do we ensure that Gen AI systems are used responsibly and do not infringe on privacy or civil liberties or like Skynet?
Well, I think first of all, it's by having conversations like this. So thank you for doing this. We need to talk about moving into the future of AI safely together. So over the last month, I've traveled for about 2 weeks. I was at RSA for a week in San Francisco, and then I went to Dallas to talk to a lot of different customers. And AI was the first thing they asked me about. What are you using? How are you using AI? What's your roadmap? But all of them asked this question of, how do we know that you're not infringing on our privacy when we ask it specific questions? Right. So it's definitely on the minds of everyone, which it really should be. I can tell you that, like, from our, like, what we do is we log the requests for a month just for auditing purposes. Legally you have to do that, but it's not used to train anything, and then it gets erased. So from Flashpoint's perspective, we don't actually. None of the AI answers ping out on the internet. It's all within our own database. Even like our news sources, that text is drawn into our own database. So it's all kind of within our safely confined space. But just from a consumer perspective, yeah, I mean, you should always ask those questions when you're using any type of AI product or LLM like this, of like, how do I know that what I put into this is not going to be leaked or trained to use a better model?
Cool. That's good to know. So I know from a fact, like, most organizations now are looking to incorporate artificial intelligence into their cybersecurity framework. And I wanted to ask you, gain your thoughts on what are the initial steps you would recommend for that if someone is looking to incorporate Gen AI in their frameworks, and are there any specific tools or platforms that you believe are leading the way in this particular space?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that, what I said about when I was talking to customers over last month. I'd say that the most sophisticated and best teams I talked to, all of them were developing some type of AI strategy within the tech stack that they're using. So not just cyber intelligence, right? All the different security products. And what they're doing is they're being quite demanding, and I think they should be, of, tell me, security product, security vendor, whoever it is, like, how are you using AI to make your product better? And prove to me that what you're doing is going to help us defend against threats in the future. So I say this because I think the one initial step is just developing that strategy, and a good way to take that first step is just reaching out to the actual vendors that you're using and saying, hey, tell me what you're doing. What is your strategy? Because then if you can get a view of where the AI developments are going across your security tech stack, then you can start understanding how you can start molding certain things together. You can get a head start on different processes that will start unfolding as this technology continues to develop at a really high pace. So I applaud all the teams that are taking those steps. And also I think I just want to say, like, I don't think anyone knows the right answer to this yet, right? As I mentioned beforehand. So perfection is the enemy of the good here. Like, just take the first step and try to get to good before you get to perfect.
Yeah, that's I think a very good way to look at it as well. So finally, what excites you most about the future of GenAI in cyber security? What do you see in terms of where AI would be 5 years from now?
Yeah, I have a pretty simple answer to that. I really, really believe in this. In fact, when I was interviewing at Flashpoint, I talked to this chief strategy officer and I said, hey, like, are you doing this or not? Because honestly, if you're not, I'm not going to join. Like, it means that much to me that companies are implementing this stuff. And so, what excites me most is if you think about kind of the brand, let's call it, of intelligence, and in our case, cyber intelligence, especially in the commercial space, because the government's a bit different, but especially in the commercial space, right? There's this narrative that we tell about the best way to secure your organizations is to understand what you're securing against before you
Mm.
secure, right? It's that know thy enemy and then know yourself, that way. But
Right.
again, if we're very honest about how things work, we're really understaffed. And so there's a lot of kind of fixing the plane while it's still in the air. And that's okay, but I think we should do a little bit better job being honest about how time constrained so much of us
Mm.
are in security. And so I think what has happened over the last decade, since I've been in cyber intelligence for about 10 years now, is while I believe that's true, while I believe you should have an intelligence forward framework of securing your organization, it's been hard to implement because of time. I think now with these large language models, it's really going to decrease the time to action in a
Mm.
serious way where we can be so much better at exactly that narrative that I'm talking about. And I think that intelligence is going to move from this kind of nice to have, as it's been historically, to this need to have type of approach where, what are the threats we need to worry about and how do we organize our organization against them? And I view just like an unlimited potential with so many of these cyber intelligence companies, very much obviously Flashpoint included, of just we've been spending the last decade just collecting so much great information, and it's so much, and now we
Yeah.
can just build an LLM on top of it and then just kind of off to the races. Now I know it's going to evolve, off to the races isn't going to be a day or a month or something like that, but I am really excited to see where this industry goes because of that.
Fascinating. Yeah, this was really a fascinating conversation, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on Gen AI and how it's used within cyber intelligence. And I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here, and go Buffs.
Go Buffs.